Hey guys, welcome to the Heart of David. In I don't know if it was my last video. You know, the videos that I do standing up, not when I'm doing video editing down there. I talked about in some respect I talked about you know, the theory of total depravity. Where did it come from? And I wanted to talk a little bit more about it, and I may talk even more about it in another video, and then after that even more about it. Where did it come from? What is it? Does it belong in the Bible? And before I even say that, I don't know. This is a very confusing topic because I'm having like this push-pull in my heart about total depravity, because I've been looking at it and I'm like, what's right, what's wrong? Are Paul's epistles, you know, are these things that we should be taught? I'll try to get it into some depth, but I want to explain my part of it first. There was one article I read that I had wished I had never read, because every time I read Paul's epistles, okay, so just understand that there are a lot of doctrines in Paul's epistles, and they're good ones, but the article that I read wasn't purposely reading from a Muslim, okay, but I read it, and the guy was just bashing Paul in every which way, saying that he shouldn't even be in there. And so I started to think to myself, you know, those kinds of things stick. What if Paul was a false prophet? But I know there's a lot of good in Paul, and there was a lot of the stuff he's writing, that Paul is writing in his epistles, has to do with things that he's already been taught. So he's quite learned. He's obviously got a high IQ, and there are many writings that convict us convict a born again Christian, things that need to be done, I do believe. But I think a lot of the way he expressed things seems to me that it goes against what Christ taught. That's just me. I have to look more into this. I just want you to understand, this isn't a teaching that I'm doing to you right now. This is my own journey. I'm not telling you not to, like, the doctrines in Paul's epistles his letters are good, you know, they're good ways to live by. But they have a certain strictness to them that if you were to take, okay, so after Christ came, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, right? Did we have total depravity in the first 5 centuries? No, we didn't. They weren't teaching on that. So it was St. Augustine who started to bring this up. And so my question is, I don't know the answer in any depth. What was the church teaching total depravity in the first, second, third, and fourth centuries? So I think the answer is no, because it says it started in the 5th century. You know, places where Paul says, like, the homosexuals, the adulterers, you know, they will not enter the kingdom of heaven. I believe there are verses, you know, this is the only person that says that is Paul, but in fact, if you go look back in the Torah, right, the first 5 books, there are things that say things about homosexuality. It does. I believe it's in Leviticus for sure, but so So I'm going to tell you what bothers me in this whole thing that got me into this. Just give me a second. And I'm going to release a video today, and it should be pretty good. I think you guys would like it. I'm debating an article on the Jewish position of Isaiah 53. And so that also includes 52, because 52 is also part of that. I'm so tired because I had to wake up 2 hours earlier for a doctor's appointment. So here's what brought me into this. I got a comment the other day. You know, like if you have YouTube, you get comments and all like that. I tend not to read them early in the morning. I tend to read them later, like probably at night, just in case there's something, you know, that I have to reply to. Because I reply on you know, like on Christian videos. And someone's like, you don't understand. And it was a Justin Peters video, I think I said to you the other day. And I noticed when I'd watch a Justin Peters video, or I'd watch Vudi Bakum, who I absolutely think is a great teacher, they start talking to a point where you feel so dirty and depraved. Literally. It's such an oppressive feeling that, you know, they're saying no one is righteous at all. No one can be righteous. No, not one. You know, it brings us right down into the dirt. And, you know, you're going to say this is true. And I understand the lengths that human beings have gone, especially now in today's age. Like we are depraved. And so this is about the doctrine of total depravity and Arminianism, which is a partial view on that. So I just had a problem after reading John's Gospel, after reading 1st, 2nd, 3rd, I forget how many Johns there are, 4 or 5. Because it says, don't be deceived, little children, don't be deceived. Those who practice righteousness are righteous. That goes completely against what they're saying. And so you and I both know that most people have bad in them. This is the whole argument. After the sin of Adam, what happened to us, right? That's what this is about. What is fallen man? What do they represent? And it's an argument about do we have a choice to make our way towards being saved by God, or is it only His grace that can pull us towards Him? And this is like so much bigger. Like, you know, we have a lot of bad thoughts, a lot of ulterior motives, money, greed, all this type of stuff. I understand that total depravity, and especially in an age like today with computers, money, cars, homes, jets, sex, everything. It's all right in front of our faces, so it's a lot worse today. It's especially true for today. Can one come to God without Him drawing you? I think it's possible. I think we can choose. I think He still gives us a choice. And one of the arguments is that Adam and Eve sinned, so there is a choice. What I know for certain is, one of the reasons why I feel offended, yeah, you can say I feel offended at this total depravity thing. Why? Because, let's just read this, okay? I'm going to read you a few things here. So I had to go to Romans 3 to look exactly, and I knew, like I just didn't know where it was to look. This is the article, and this is the chapter in question, Romans 3, verse 10. Sorry guys, I'm so tired, man. As it is written, there is none righteous, not one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks after God. They have all turned aside. They have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good. Remember, this isn't the teachings of Jesus Christ. But I know you're going to say this is the teaching of Jesus Christ because he had, these are all God-breathed. But just please listen. There's no one who does good, no, not one. Their throat is open tomb. Their tongues practice deceit. The poison of asp is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the ways of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and the world may become guilty before God. Knowing the Ten Commandments, right, breaking those, we wouldn't know sin, right, without it, right? So there is none righteous, not one. I don't agree with that. Now here's what I mean about that. A born-again Christian, I believe, is a righteous person. Righteous all the time? No. And you might say, well, they just do righteous acts. No one understands. No one seeks after God. Well, isn't that what I'm doing in this video? Trying to share it with other people. They have all turned aside. I haven't turned aside since I was reborn, and I've been like this for a while. The question is, and I was reading into this, I was studying this last night. The problem with this chapter, in many chapters that Paul's talking about, they're just his opinions, and they don't know exactly who he's talking about. There are many things that Paul taught that are excellent, and I agree with, but there are things that seem to be his opinion, and I don't know, there seems to be a lot of contradictions between what he said and what Jesus Christ said. Like I said, let no one deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous. John says that. So, right now in my life, I'm having a problem with this total depravity. Though I believe that they're correct, it's in the amount that they're saying. They're saying it in such a way that brings us so low that it takes out the love aspect, which Christ was saying. And to sum this up in what I'm thinking is, and someone said this in a thing I read last night, like I just don't believe all of that, because what is it, Matthew 23 says, what was it, the teacher came up to Jesus and he said, what is the greatest commandment? And he said, to love Yah with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And that's the rest hang off of that, right? Like, you're doing good if you're doing those two things. It seems to go against what Paul is saying to me, because I do these things. I love Yahweh, okay? I love Jesus Christ. And I love my neighbors. So when I look at this total depravity and look at it like I'm a piece of garbage, I have an issue with that. And I understand how wicked people are. And I've said this, I've testified saying this, that I heard this from Paul Washer, who, I don't know if he's a Calvinist, he probably is, I don't know though, is that he said if anyone who thinks they're good sit them down at the table, put a wire to their head, and if you played their thoughts for like 15 seconds, they would run out of the room. And yes, I believe that. So let's start looking into what some of this stuff says. I'm going to read two things. Give me a sec, because I'm trying to eat as I go along here. So besides Paul's writings, okay? Paul's writings, Paul's opinions. How many parts of the Old Testament, so I think it was Isaiah, right? Our righteousness is like filthy rags. I made a video on this. Is that the context of what's happening in Israel? Or is that to all of us? It could be all of us. How many other statements in the Bible besides that are there? There's what's it, Jeremiah? Who can know? You know, the heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? But there aren't that many sayings, I don't believe. They come from Paul. The doctrine of total depravity comes from Paul. So here's the major thing that this comes down to. What was the church living like in the first 4 centuries without total depravity? The history of the Calvinist-Arminian debate begins in the early 17th century in the Netherlands with a Christian theological dispute between the followers of John Calvin and Jacobus Arminius. It continues today among some Protestants, particularly evangelicals. The debate centers around soteriology, study of religious doctrines of salvation, and includes disputes about total depravity, predestination, and atonement. So I do believe in predestination, but I also believe in choice too. And that's very hard to describe. While the debate was given its Calvinist Arminian form in the 17th century, issues central to the debate have been discussed in Christianity in some form since Augustine of Hippo, also known as St. Augustine, was a theologian, philosopher of Berber origin, and the Bishop of Hippo, Regius in Numidia, Roman North Africa. His writings influenced the development of Western philosophy and Western Christianity. So he disputes the Pelagians in the 5th century. So since have been discussed in Christianity in some form since Augustine of Hippo's disputes with the Pelagians, so in the 5th century. So it began then. So the question, I'll get what the Pelagians are in a second. Augustine and Pelagius. Pelagius was a British monk who journeyed to Rome around the year 400 AD and was appalled at what he perceived as the improper behavior within churches. To combat this lack of holiness, he preached a gospel that began with justification through faith alone, which I believe. We are not saved by works, but good works are still good. How else are we going to help people in this world, the poor, the people who are downtrodden by wicked, by whatever, justice? He preached a gospel that began with justification through faith alone. It was actually Pelagius, not Luther, who first added the word alone to Paul's phrase, but finished through human effort and morality. He had read Augustine's Confessions and believed it to be a fantastic and pessimistic view of human nature. And that's what it is, fatalistic and pessimistic. Where's the love? Pelagius' followers, including Celestius, went further than their teacher and removed justification through faith, setting up the morality and works-based salvation known as Pelagianism. So I don't believe in works-based. The only historical evidence of the teachings of Pelagius or his followers is found through the writings of his two strongest opponents, Augustine and Jerome. In response to Pelagius, I can't remember who I agree with. Was it Pelagius or was it Jerome? Augustine adopted a theological system that included not only original sin, but also a form of predestination. I want to get at the point here. Some authors maintain that Augustine taught the doctrines of limited atonement and of irresistible grace later with classic Calvinism. However, others insist that Augustine's writings conflict with these doctrines. Critics maintain that part of Augustine's philosophy might have stemmed from his expertise in Greek philosophy, particularly Plato, and Manichaeism, which maintained a high view of man's spirit and a low view of man's body. Against the Pelagian notion that man can do everything right, he taught that man can do little right. Thus he reasoned man cannot even accept the offer of salvation. There it is. That we can't accept it. I believe we can. But I also believe in partial depravity. It must be God who chooses for himself, that's called Arminianism, who chooses for himself individuals to bring to salvation. So there it is, right? The question is it Yah who brings us to him alone? And there's the answer. It's Arminianism for me. I believe it's a choice, and it can also happen that way. So there's a lot in this. There's just way too much, actually. I'm going to read God questions to you because they just give a lot of history. I'm going to take a sip here and then actually. So this is God questions. Total depravity is a phrase or name that is used to summarize what the Bible teaches about the spiritual condition of fallen man. It's the acronym TULIP, which is commonly used to enumerate what are known as the 5 points of Calvinism, or the doctrines of grace. Because the name total depravity can cause people to have wrong ideas about what is meant, some people prefer to use total inability, righteous incapability, radical corruption, or even moral inability. Yet what's important is not the name assigned to the doctrine, but how accurately the doctrine summarizes what the Bible teaches about the spirit condition of fallen man. No matter which name you use to prefer to total depravity, the fact remains that, when properly understood, it's an accurate description of what the Bible does teach on this important topic. Let me take a break in my voice. While often misunderstood, the doctrine of total depravity is an acknowledgement that the Bible teaches that as a result of the fall of man, Genesis 3:6, every part of man, his mind, will, emotions, and flesh, have been corrupted by sin. It has. In other words, sin affects all areas of our being, including who we are and what we do. It penetrates to the very core of our being, so that everything is tainted by sin, and all our righteous acts are like filthy rags. I hear this over and over and over. I don't know if I agree with that. From the eyes of Yah, does it look that way? Here's the thing. they're saying that even when we go to, for instance, my last video, right, talking about I helped that person, I did that for both myself. Just give me a sec here. I'm gonna come back. That's my doctor. Hello. Yes. I don't have one. I thought it was just a roadmap. She told me that she was thinking that. Am I supposed to know about this, or? Because all I was told was to get permission from her. They didn't tell me anything further about that. Apologies. If you want to wait. I'm not going to redo this video. I'm waiting for my doctor on the phone here, so just fast forward and look for it. Thought they were going to cancel my appointment at the last second. They always call when I'm making a video. Okay,
And so, this service Canada called, and I'm not sure, but we know when we bring it in. So I'll check with that one.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that, and I'll look to see if there's a form, but I wasn't advised that there was one. Because I spoke to someone on the phone. Isn't that? Because I'm just about to come. I'm traveling my brothers and stuff.
Well, that's what we're calling, discuss more information on it.
Okay, I'll go look and then I'll do it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Sorry, guys. What was I getting at? While often misunderstood, the doctrine of total depravity is an acknowledgement of the Bible that teaches as a result of the fall of man, his wills and emotions have been corrupted, who we are and what we do. It penetrates to the core of our being so that everything is tainted by sin. Okay, so here's a contradiction. Okay, our acts are like filthy rags. Are they really? Yes, this is what I was saying. So when I go to do this, I was doing this for, of course, when you do something good for somebody, you do it for yourself as well. Did I have any ulterior motives? I wanted to do this in Yah's name. So what they're saying here is it's filthy. This is a problem I have with this. I don't think it's right. But there are certainly people who do things for certain motives in churches and stuff like that, and they're religious, right? I don't have any ulterior motives. I'm not trying to look good for people because really I'm an isolated person. I don't really have friends. I don't really have, this is it right here. Not that I don't talk to people and stuff like that and deal with people, but so listen to what Jesus says. So every good tree bears good fruit, but every bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a. So nor can a bad tree produce good fruit, right? Tired, man. So basically, Jesus there is saying that we can be good. If you're a born-again believer, you're going to likely have good fruit. So this is why I go against the full doctrine of total depravity. The total depravity of man is seen throughout the Bible. Man's heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. So there it is. Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? So definitely people get to that point. There's a lot of people today. The Bible also teaches that man is born dead in transgression. Psalm 51, 58, Ephesians 2:1-5. The Bible teaches that because unregenerate man is dead in transgressions, he is held captive by a love for sin, so that he will not seek God because he loves the darkness and doesn't understand the things of God. There's a lot of different chapters to look at. I'm going to leave this in the description box. Therefore, men suppress the truth of God in unrighteousness, Romans 1, right? And continually willfully live in sin. Because they are totally depraved, this sinful lifestyle seems right to men, so they reject the gospel of Christ as foolishness. And their mind is hostile toward God, for it doesn't subject itself to the law of God, for it's unable to do so. So these writings are taught by Paul. That's what I'm trying to say. Not to say there aren't verses that pertain to this topic, but he goes way in depth. What I'm finding is that through these total depravity, okay, I'm finding that the love is removed. That's what I'm finding this does. This is what I find that Paul has done. And if I saw Paul today, I love Paul. It's not like that, and I love his teachings, but it portrays the gospel in a different light, I find. And he is not a replacement for Jesus Christ in the Gospels. And then people, people are going to say, well, if not for him, it wouldn't have gone to the Gentiles in the way that it did. I think it eventually would have, yes. But in one verse, Paul says that, don't eat things that make your brother stumble. But then yet Peter had his vision of the big sheet or blanket that came down and said, everything by God is clean, right? Except those, things that are strangled by animals, blood, and the rest, right? I'm not doing well here. The Apostle Paul summarizes the total depravity of man in Romans 3, as I read. He begins this passage by saying that both Jews and Greeks are under sin. Simply put, this means that man is under the control of sin, or is controlled by sin nature, his natural tendency to sin. The fact that unregenerate people are controlled by their selfish regeneration, being born again, regenerated. Listen, my experience, I was, and it happened very quickly. And I know that was Yah that pulled me towards him. But I believe there are naturally good people who can make that choice. Listen, my choice was always towards Christ anyways. But I was doing a lot of sinful stuff. But there are good people who never lived those lives that are in Christ. I do believe that. Simply put, this means that man is under the control of sin, or is controlled by his sin nature, his natural tendencies to sin. The fact that regenerate people are controlled by their selfish, sinful tendencies should not come as a surprise to any parent. What parent has to teach his or her child to be selfish, to covet what someone else has, or lie? Those actions come naturally from the child's sin nature. Instead, the parents must devote much time to teaching the child the importance of telling the truth, of sharing instead of being selfish, or obeying instead of rebelling. Then in the rest of the passage, Paul quotes extensively from the Old Testament, explaining how sinful man really is. For example, we see that, number one, no one is without sin. No one seeks after God. I don't believe that. There's no one who is good. I don't believe that. Their speech is corrupted by sin. I believe that. Their actions are corrupted by sin. I believe that. Above all, they have no fear of God. Well, that comes down to choice. So when one considers, go look up Arminianism, okay? When one considers even these few verses, it becomes abundantly clear the Bible does indeed teach that fallen man is totally depraved, because sin affects all of him, including his mind, will, and emotion, so that there is no one who does good, no, not one. I'm going to have to, sorry guys, because of that call, I'm getting caught in something right now, because I only have so much time to do something. So I'm just going to leave this in the description box. Like I got that call because right before I have to, if I go there without some form that I'm supposed to print out that I wasn't told about, then there's no point in even going. So, however, when the doctrine of total depravity is properly understood, many people will reject the doctrine, but that fact should not surprise us, since the world generally thinks of man as basically good. Therefore, the idea that man by nature is a depraved sinner runs contrary to most modern religious, psychological, and philosophical views of the basic nature of man. But the fact is that the Bible does teach the depravity of the human heart. I think it does. If you were to take Paul out and look at the rest of the Bible, there wouldn't be a lot of it. Obviously the prophets talk about Judah and the way that they're a harlot and all this type of stuff. Yes, it does. But not like Paul. The basic nature of man. But the fact is that the Bible does teach the depravity of the human heart, and the root cause of man's problems is not the environment he's raised in, but his wicked and selfish heart. Properly understood, the doctrine of total depravity will destroy the hopes of those who place their faith in any types of work-based system of salvation, and will recognize that God's sovereign grace is man's only hope. While the doctrine of total depravity destroys man's self-righteousness and any misconceptions about man's ability to be saved through his own free will, it leaves one asking the same question this disciple asked of Jesus in Matthew 19:25-26. Where does it say here? Yeah, I think it was at the point where he said, about the rich. It'd be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Who then can be saved? Of course, the answer remains the same. With people, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. That's the first of the 5 doctrines of what's called Calvinism. The doctrine of total depravity correctly focuses man's attention on the rest of these doctrines of grace, which declare the wondrous work of God and the salvation of sinners. So in this video, I wasn't able to cover the altar Arminianism, and also people who completely go against this doctrine. I'm not trying to teach us. I'm trying to tell you. I don't believe. This is my personal belief. I understand that the heart is desperately wicked, but there are good people. The question is, can they draw themselves to God and make that choice? Sorry, God, yeah. I'm just trying to make this quick. And I think the answer is there is a choice, but obviously there is also predestination, and I think he draws people to himself. I believed, but I believe he drew near me because I repented, and you can understand how confusing this all is. I'll do it in another video, but guys, I gotta go. God bless. Have a good day.